I need $48,000 back from my own mother.
Just let that sink in for a second.
My own mother?
The woman who tucked me in at night, who braided my hair on Sunday mornings, the one who told me I could trust her with anything. I trusted her with everything. And she took it. Not all at once, and not in one bold, obvious move. No, she took it the way water erodes a cliff. Slowly, patiently, with a smile on her face and a reason ready for every single time I started to wonder. I want to tell you this story from the beginning, because if I just drop you in the middle, you'll think I'm exaggerating. You'll think, surely there's something she's leaving out. For years, I thought the exact same thing. I grew up in a house where money was never discussed openly. It was always tight, always stressful, and we learned early not to ask questions about it. My mom was the kind of woman who could make something out of nothing. She could stretch a dollar until it screamed. I admired that about her. I really thought it made her resourceful. I didn't realize until much later that it also made her dangerous. Because a woman who knows how to survive at any cost will sometimes make you pay that cost without ever asking your permission. I was 26 when I landed the job that changed everything. It wasn't glamorous. I was doing data analysis for a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. But it paid well, really well. I went from scraping by on $32,000 a year to pulling in close to $80,000. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. Like I could actually plan a future instead of just surviving the present. I opened a savings account. I started putting money away every single month, like clockwork. I was proud of myself in a way I had never been before.
My mom noticed, of course.
She had this way of picking up on things without ever making it obvious. She just dropped these casual little comments, like, "You seem like you're doing really well for yourself, baby." And honestly, I soaked it all up. Because that's what daughters do when their mothers finally see them. You just absorb it, like dry earth after a long rain. I was just so happy she was proud of me. The first ask came about 8 months after my promotion. She called me on a Tuesday evening, which was weird. She usually just texted. When I saw her name light up, my stomach kind of dropped. But I answered it anyway. I mean, it's my mom, right? I sat there in my quiet apartment, pressing the phone to my ear. I had no idea what was about to start. She told me she was 3 months behind on rent. She said the landlord was threatening to evict her. She was crying. Real tears? Or at least what sounded like real tears. She said she was too embarrassed to tell anyone else. I sat there feeling the walls just close in around me. What was I supposed to say? This was the woman who gave me life. You don't just let your mother get evicted. So I sent her $2,000 that exact same night. I even told her not to worry about paying it back. I said, we're family, and family takes care of each other. It felt like the only option. She thanked me so many times I lost count. She called me her guardian angel. She even told my Aunt Renee that I had saved her life. And honestly, it felt good. I'm not going to pretend I didn't like it. There's something deeply human about being needed by your mom. The person who used to be everything for you suddenly needs you. It makes you feel important. But then it happened again. 2 months later, her car transmission went out. She needed $1,500 to get to work. I sent it without asking questions because cars break down. It made sense. Then it was a medical bill. Then it was her phone. She said it cracked, and she couldn't afford a new one. And she had to be reachable for work. Then it was groceries, just to get by until payday.
then a deposit for a new apartment.
Her landlord raised the rent, so she had to move fast.
It was always an emergency.
The crazy thing is, each ask was totally reasonable on its own. Every single one had a logical explanation.
It all made perfect sense in the moment.
She wrapped every request in just enough vulnerability. Turning her down felt like absolute cruelty.
I just couldn't bear to be the bad guy, not to my own mom.
Here's the part I'm most ashamed to admit.
I never wrote any of it down. I didn't keep track of a single dime.
I just kept saying yes.
Keeping track felt so cold. It felt like I was treating my own mother like a transaction, and I refused to be that kind of daughter.
I wanted to trust her. That refusal to keep score cost me.
It cost me $48,000. Let that sink in for a second.
48 grand.
I didn't even know the actual number. Not until I sat down one night, 2.5 years into this cycle,
I finally decided to go through my bank statements.
I told myself I was just doing a routine financial check-in.
My therapist had actually suggested it. Just a little exercise to feel more grounded. Nothing major. I made a cup of tea and opened my laptop.
I started pulling up the records, and I just sat there, going through it line by line, transfer by transfer. 48 grand in 2.5 years? My savings account was basically empty.
That account was my first real taste of financial freedom.
And it was just gone. 48 grand in 2.5 years? My savings account was basically empty.
That account was my first real taste of financial freedom.
And it was just gone.
I didn't call her that night.
I honestly couldn't. I just sat with it.
I made another cup of tea and sat in the dead silence of my apartment.
I was just trying to wrap my head around what actually happened to me.
Here's the thing nobody tells you about being financially exploited by a parent. It doesn't feel like exploitation while it's happening.
It feels like love. It feels like duty.
It feels like the most natural thing in the world.
You're raised to believe that family comes first, and that sacrifice is noble.
You're taught that a good daughter shows up when her mom calls.
I called my Aunt Renee the next morning. She's my mom's older sister and pretty much the only neutral party in our family. I told her what I found, and then I just waited. There was this really long pause on her end of the line. I could hear her taking a slow breath, and then she said something that just cracked me open. She said, "Honey, your mama's been doing this her whole life." I asked her what she meant by that.
Renee took another breath, and she laid it all out for me.
She told me about the 6 grand my grandmother gave my mom, which she never saw again. She told me about a cousin who lent her money for some business venture that didn't even exist. She brought up my Uncle David, who completely stopped talking to my mom after she wrecked his car and lied about it. She told me this was a pattern. A long, deeply ingrained pattern that everyone knew about, and that everyone in the family knew it. Nobody had warned me. They assumed I would figure it out the way they all did. Eventually, painfully, and too late.
I hung up the phone, and I sat on the floor of my bathroom. Not for any dramatic reason. It was just the closest surface to where I was standing.
My legs just decided they were done holding me up. I sat there, and I thought about every conversation I'd had with my mother. Realizing the truth, I replayed them differently now. Not as a daughter hearing her mother's needs, but as a person watching a performance. And the worst part was, I still wasn't completely sure it was all calculated. That's what makes it so devastating. When someone is both your mother and someone who uses love as a tool, You can never fully separate the two.
I decided I needed to confront her. Not out of rage. I had passed through rage somewhere in that bathroom. I came out the other side into something quieter and colder. I needed answers. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to say the number out loud and see what she did with it. I drove to her apartment on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't tell her I was coming. I brought absolutely nothing with me. No printed bank statements, no receipts, nothing. Just myself and the undeniable weight of that number. $48,000. I knocked on the door. She answered in her house coat, looking surprised but happy to see me. She had that same warm smile, like everything was perfectly fine. She hugged me and asked if I wanted lunch. I just stood there for a second, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I said no. I sat down at her kitchen table. I looked right at her, and I said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the money." The shift in her face was immediate. If I was still the daughter I used to be, I might have missed it. But I watched her eyes go calculating behind her smile, before rearranging into something wounded. She said she didn't know what I meant. I told her I had gone through my statements. I looked her right in the eye, and I told her the number. She went completely quiet, and she said I was being hurtful. She told me I was keeping score like a stranger, instead of acting like her daughter. Then she started to cry. She talked about how much she had struggled and how she thought I knew she'd pay it back. She said this wasn't the kind of conversation a loving child has with their parent. And every single one of those words was designed to make me feel like the monster. I didn't raise my voice. So I sat very still, and I just let her finish. Then I said, "Mom, I'm not angry with you, but I need you to acknowledge what happened. I need you to say the number with me." She wouldn't do it. She stood up, turned her back to me, and started washing dishes. She told me I had always been too sensitive, too focused on money. Then came the final move in her playbook. The threat of future grief. She told me that one day when she was gone, I would regret spending our time together like this. Come back to me now, or mourn me later. I left without raising my voice. I just walked out the door. I drove home. And somewhere on the highway, between her apartment and mine, I made a decision. I decided to stop. I didn't stop loving her. I don't think I ever will. But I did stop being available. I changed how I answered her calls. Slowly at first. Then less and less. I only picked up when I had the mental energy to hold a boundary. And I stopped sending money. The very first time she asked after our fight, I just said, "I can't right now, Mom." She pushed back, obviously. I just repeated it, and then she hung up on me. I sat there in my apartment with the awful discomfort of that silence. But I didn't fill it with a bank transfer. The very next month, I started therapy. Real, consistent, twice-a-week therapy. I found a woman who absolutely refused to let me romanticize what had happened to me. She helped me untangle the mess in my head. She taught me one of the most important truths I've ever learned in my life. That love and exploitation are not mutually exclusive. A person can love you and still take from you in ways that cause real, lasting harm. Recognizing that harm doesn't erase the love, but it means you get to protect yourself anyway. So I started rebuilding my savings. It took 18 months of absolute grinding and sacrifice. And yeah, there were more than a few nights where I just sat around feeling sorry for myself. But I did it. I'm not back to 48 grand yet, but I'm closer than I've ever been. And every single dollar in that account feels completely different now. It feels deliberate. It feels chosen. It feels like it's actually mine in a way nothing ever felt mine before. Because I had to fight for it. And I wasn't fighting against some stranger.
I was fighting against someone I loved.
And I was fighting against the version of myself that would have just kept giving until there was nothing left.
My mom and I still talk, but it's definitely not what it used to be.
I don't think it'll ever go back to that, honestly. We stick to birthdays and holidays now. I've had to slowly, painfully learn how to grieve the mom I really needed her to be.
And I had to just accept the one she actually is.
I love her from a distance now. It's a boundary that keeps us both safe. It protects her from my resentment, and it protects me from her constant need. If you're watching this and something in my story sounds a little too familiar to you, if you felt that specific exhaustion of being someone's soft place to fall until you're completely empty, I really want you to hear this directly from me. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. Drawing a line in the sand is not abandonment. You can love someone with your whole heart and still refuse to let them empty you out. That's not being hard or cold. That's just survival. And honestly, sometimes survival is the most loving thing you can do. Say, for them, yeah, but especially for yourself. That's the part nobody ever warned me about. Nobody told me that finally taking my life back would feel like a massive loss and a homecoming at the exact same time. Nobody told me I'd actually grieve the toxic dynamic, even while I was so incredibly grateful to be free of it. It's a really weird feeling. Healing from family trauma isn't a straight line. It's this long, winding road that sometimes doubles back and makes you question everything you thought you knew. I actually rebuilt my savings. It took 18 long months of grinding, sacrificing, and just putting my head down to make it happen. There were definitely more than a few nights of sitting alone and feeling sorry for myself. But I pushed through and I did it. I don't have the full $48,000 back yet, but I'm closer than I have ever been. And honestly, that's enough for now. And every single dollar in that account now feels completely different to me. It feels deliberate. It feels like a choice I made. It feels like mine in a way that nothing really felt mine before. Because I had to fight tooth and nail for it. And I wasn't fighting a stranger. I was fighting someone I loved. And I was fighting the version of myself that would have just kept giving until I was completely empty. My mother and I still speak. It's definitely not what it was. And I don't think it ever will be again, to be honest. I've slowly, painfully learned to grieve the mother I desperately needed her to be, while finally accepting the one she actually is. We talk on birthdays now, sometimes on holidays. I love her from a distance that keeps us both safe and sane. It keeps her safe from my resentment. And more importantly, it keeps me safe from her endless need. If you're watching this and something in my story sounds familiar, if you felt that specific exhaustion of being someone's soft place to fall, until you have absolutely nothing left to give, I want you to hear this directly from me. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. Say, drawing a line is not abandonment. You can love someone completely and still refuse to be emptied by them. That is not hardness. That is survival. And sometimes survival is the most loving thing you can do. For them, sure, but especially for yourself. That's the part nobody really warned me about. Nobody told me that taking my life back would feel like a loss and a homecoming at the exact same time.
Nobody told me I'd grieve the dynamic, even while I was so grateful to be free of it.
Nobody told me that healing from family trauma isn't a straight line. It's a long, winding road that sometimes doubles back on itself.
And makes you question everything you thought you knew.
But I'm still walking it.
And if you're here listening to this, I think you might be too.